Captain, fleet is reporting full readiness. All systems are operational. Dr. Davin's voice came through the comms, a trace of nervousness hidden behind the professional tone. The scientist had never been much for military strategy, but now their fates were intertwined. Earth's future and humanity's place in the cosmos rested on the edge of a blade. Volkov nodded but said nothing. She didn't need words to convey the gravity of the situation. The Blackstar was no longer just a theoretical weapon, it was real. And it was the only card humanity had to play. She turned away from the display and faced Davin, who stood beside her, adjusting his glasses nervously. His scientific curiosity was now overshadowed by the stark reality of their situation. Despite his extensive knowledge of the Blackstar, he had never anticipated using it in the way they were now forced to. "I know what you're thinking, Davin," Volkov said, her voice low, almost a whisper. "You're wondering if we're prepared for what happens after the Blackstar is activated. What if it doesn't work? What if we can't control it?" Davin's eyes flickered with hesitation. "I'm not worried about whether it works. I know the prototype is capable. What I'm worried about is the aftermath, the galaxy's response. We've never been seen as a serious threat, Captain, until now. But they may not view this as an opportunity for negotiation. They may see it as a reason to strike first." Volkov's expression hardened. "That's why we're going to strike first. No one has the right to underestimate humanity any longer. The galaxy has been blind to us for too long. They've seen our technology and dismissed us as primitive. We'll show them how wrong they are. We have nothing to lose." Far across the galaxy, in the council chamber of the Haxar Dominion, Trazyn stood before a glowing display that showed Earth's fleet, in motion. She had no illusions about the human resolve. She had felt it in her bones the moment she saw the Blackstar come online. Now, it was no longer a matter of avoiding war, it was about surviving it. But even in her moment of clarity, she couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed. Humanity was no longer the reckless species it had once been. "What do we do now?" Kareth asked, his voice edged with uncertainty. The Zathari diplomat had always been an advocate of diplomacy, but even he couldn't ignore the new reality facing the galaxy. Earth had entered a new stage of power and its implications were terrifying. "We need to act," Trazyn replied, her eyes narrowing as she processed the data. "But we cannot make the same mistake twice. The Blackstar prototype is only the beginning. Humanity is not a species to be underestimated anymore. We need to know what their next move is." Vroth interjected, his voice gruff, "and we need to act fast. If we give them a chance to mobilize fully, they may have the upper hand." "Their next move is clear," Trazyn said, turning toward the screen. "They will try to force our hand. The Blackstar is a message. But the message isn't just a weapon. It's their defiance, their refusal to be subjugated. They will push us to act, and when we do, they'll be ready." "You're suggesting that we wait?" Kareth asked, clearly skeptical. Trazyn nodded slowly, her mind working through the options. "We have no choice. We can't allow our panic to dictate our actions. We need to understand the true nature of the threat before we respond. Humanity isn't just testing us with this weapon. They're testing our patience, and I don't intend to fail that test." Back on Earth, Volkov paced the length of the command center, her boots clicking against the cold metal floor. The crew had all gone silent, aware of the gravity of the moment. A single decision now could determine the fate of billions. No one knew exactly what would happen when the Blackstar was activated, least of all the alien forces watching from afar. But Volkov had made up her mind long ago. Earth had nothing left to prove. "Captain, we're receiving a transmission from the Zathari," Dr. Davin said, breaking the silence. His voice was tinged with disbelief. "They're asking for a diplomatic response. They want to talk." Volkov stopped mid-stride. The Zathari? They were the least likely to negotiate. They had always seen themselves as above such things. Their culture was based on intellect, on controlling information, on manipulating others. They didn't need to talk. They took action. And now they were the ones asking for diplomacy? "Put them through," Volkov ordered, her voice hard. She didn't have time for games. If the Zathari were serious, they'd have to prove it. Hologram flickered to life in front of her, and the familiar face of Kareth appeared. His spindly frame hunched over as he sat in his ornate chair. The Zathari diplomat looked as composed as ever, but there was a slight tremor in his voice. Captain Volkov, I must admit, we are surprised by the activation of the Blackstar prototype. We never anticipated humanity having the capacity to complete such a weapon. But I am here to extend an offer of negotiation. We wish to avoid conflict. Volkov's eyes narrowed, a flicker of amusement crossing her face. You wish to avoid conflict? After watching us for years? After dismissing us as a minor threat? Now you want peace? Kareth's many eyes shifted nervously. We did not anticipate such a drastic shift in your capabilities. But make no mistake, Captain, we are not interested in war. We are simply asking for a conversation to understand why you have chosen this path. If you seek peace, we are open to discussing terms. I'll tell you why we've chosen this path, Volkov said, her voice steady and cold. For centuries, Earth has been ignored, underestimated, and discarded. You've all treated us as an afterthought. But no more. Humanity has suffered enough. It's time for us to take our place in this galaxy. And you, Kareth, are going to learn that you cannot ignore us anymore. Back on the council station, Trazyn listened to the exchange, her mind racing. Volkov's words were clear. The humans weren't seeking a negotiated settlement. They were making a statement. They were declaring their right to exist alongside the galactic powers, and they were prepared to fight to make it so. But Trazyn wasn't convinced that this was the full picture. Humanity had something else in mind. There had to be more to the Blackstar than simple defiance. It was a calculated move, but Trazyn sensed that Volkov's cold resolve was masking something deeper. They're not just showing us their strength, Trazyn said aloud, more to herself than anyone else in the room. They're showing us their desperation. Vroth, still skeptical, shook his head. Desperation? They have a weapon capable of wiping us out. There's nothing desperate about that. Trazyn turned to face him, her eyes fierce. You're not seeing it clearly. They've thrown the gauntlet down. They want us to underestimate them to make the first move. If we do, we fall right into their hands. And that's the last thing we want. Back on Earth, Volkov stood at the helm of the Blackstar prototype, the overwhelming power of the weapon radiating out into space. She knew that there would be no turning back after this moment. The aliens were watching, and she could feel their eyes on her. But she was prepared for this. Whatever came next, whatever the galaxy would throw at humanity, she would not allow them to be brushed aside again. The fight was no longer about survival. It was about proving that humanity had earned its place among the stars. The countdown had reached its final moments, and with one decisive push, Volkov activated the Blackstar. The universe would never be the same again. The Blackstar prototype roared to life, sending waves of energy across the galaxy. The aliens, once confident in their dominance, now felt the weight of humanity's defiance. Volkov stood resolute, her hands steady on the controls, knowing that no matter the outcome, humanity had forever altered the course of history. The Council, in disarray, scrambled to react, but the humans had already begun to shift the balance of power. With Earth's new weapon active, Volkov whispered, "This is just the beginning." As the Blackstar's pulse echoed, the galaxy trembled, unsure of what would come next. Humanity, those primitive, barely spacefaring creatures, managed to turn their greatest fear into a reality. Trazyn, the officer from the Haxar Dominion, could feel the gnawing fear in her chest. The Blackstar prototype was supposed to be an artifact of Earth's futility, a grandiose project that would never leave the drawing board. It was a myth, a whisper among the stars. But now, that myth was alive, and it was fully operational. Trazyn clenched her fists, feeling the rare, unfamiliar sensation of panic rising within her. The humans are not the same as they were a century ago. Kareth, the Zathari representative, finally broke the silence. His voice was low, but laced with an undertone of urgency. They've hidden this technology from us. For all these years, they've been working on it in secret. Trazyn turned to face Kareth, her voice cold and steady, betraying none of the fear that gripped her heart. We cannot waste time lamenting our underestimation of them. We need to act, now. Vroth, the elder of the Arimian ascendancy, leaned forward, his 6 arms crossed tightly over his chest. His age-old wisdom had always been a pillar of strength, but now, even he seemed shaken. Act? How, Trazyn? They have a weapon capable of destroying entire fleets. A weapon we never thought they'd finish. This isn't about military action anymore. This is about survival. You're wrong, Trazyn said, her voice cutting through the tension. It's about understanding them. Why did they activate the Blackstar? What do they want? We cannot just react blindly. We need to know what drives them before we make our next move. Kareth's eyes glinted with skepticism, but he was too deeply rattled by the events unfolding to argue further. We don't have the luxury of waiting. They'll be ready to strike long before we're able to gather any useful information. The tension in the chamber thickened, each member of the council lost in thought, debating the best course of action. Finally, Trazyn spoke again, this time with more conviction. The humans have never been a threat to us before, she began, her voice steadying. They've fought wars among themselves, struggled with their own existence. But the Blackstar is not about survival. It's about proving something, about showing that they can reach beyond their limitations. This is not an act of desperation, but of defiance. Vroth, still unconvinced, scoffed. Defiance? Against what exactly? Against us, Trazyn said, her voice sharp, as if the words themselves were a revelation. Against everything we've represented to them. We've always considered them inferior, primitive. Now they've given us a glimpse of their true potential. They've shown us that they're capable of more than we ever thought. Kareth frowned, his mind spinning. What are you suggesting? That we let them continue? Let them play with weapons that could obliterate us? No, Trazyn responded quickly. But we must understand their motivations. We need to know what they want from us. Why they would risk everything to reveal this weapon. They're not doing this just to flex their muscles. There's something deeper at play here. Back on Earth, Captain Erika Volkov stood in front of a massive screen in the command center, the data streaming across it showing the immediate reactions of the Galactic Council to the activation of the Blackstar. She wasn't concerned with their confusion or fear. That was their problem, not hers. Instead, her focus was on the tactical implications. The Blackstar prototype wasn't just a weapon. It was humanity's declaration of independence. A message to the entire galaxy that Earth wasn't going to be pushed around any longer, that they could be more than just a footnote in galactic history. But even as she considered the grand strategy, a nagging question lingered in the back of her mind. What were they going to do next? The prototype had been activated, and the countdown was ticking down. Humanity had crossed a line. Now there was no turning back. The universe would soon see what Earth was capable of, and Volkov needed to be prepared for whatever came next. Captain, the fleet is in position. Dr. Davin's voice broke through her thoughts, pulling her back to the present. He stepped up beside her, his face tense, his usual scientific demeanor replaced with a rare sense of urgency. We've completed our final simulations. The Blackstar is ready. Volkov didn't look at him immediately. Her eyes were fixed on the screen, her mind racing with possibilities. She could feel the weight of her decision pressing down on her. She could almost hear the Council's panic across the stars. The fleet's in position, she repeated, her voice cold. And what about us? Are we ready to face whatever the galaxy throws at us? Davin hesitated, his fingers tapping nervously on the control panel. We have the technology, Captain. We've built the prototype to be operational under the most extreme conditions. But the reality is, we're entering unknown territory now. There's no guarantee the prototype will work as intended against alien forces. The Council won't take this lightly. Volkov's eyes shifted to him, her gaze hardening. I don't care what they do. The prototype will work, it has to. In the Alien Council chamber, Trazyn's mind raced as she considered the situation. Time was running out. The humans had made their move. and now it was up to her to decide how to respond. The galaxy could no longer afford to underestimate Earth. The Blackstar prototype had proven that much. But what if it was a trap? What if the humans had somehow engineered the weapon to be a bluff, to see how the galaxy would react? Trazyn couldn't ignore the possibility. It was a high-stakes game they were playing, and she had to outthink the humans at every turn. "We need to make contact with Earth," Trazyn said, breaking the silence. Her tone was now measured, every word calculated. "We need to understand their intentions before this escalates further." Vroth was the first to object. "Contact? Are you insane? We don't know if we can trust them. What if they're playing us for fools?" "Then we play along," Trazyn replied, her voice firm. "We offer a negotiation, a show of diplomacy. We cannot attack blindly. We need information. We need to know if this is an isolated incident or if this is part of a larger strategy." "And if they don't want to negotiate?" Kareth asked. "Then, we prepare for the worst," Trazyn said, her eyes steely. "We have no choice now. The galaxy's balance of power has shifted, and we are not in control anymore." Back on Earth, Captain Volkov looked out across the vast expanse of space, watching as Earth's fleet moved into position. She knew the galaxy was watching, and she knew that they would try to stop them, try to crush the humans before they could rise to power. But humanity had been fighting for this moment for centuries. They had bled and suffered for it. Now, they had the weapon to show the galaxy what they were made of. It wasn't just about the Blackstar. It was about Earth's survival. Earth's place in the stars, and no one was going to take that away from her people. The countdown was nearing zero. The Blackstar prototype was on the brink of activation, and the future of humanity hung in the balance. Trazyn, in the alien council chamber, felt a shiver run down her spine. She could no longer predict what the humans would do next. She had underestimated them. And now the universe would feel the consequences. The stars outside the command center were a glittering sea of possibilities. But for Captain Erika Volkov, they were now a reminder of just how far humanity had come, and how fragile their position in the galaxy truly was. Her eyes, steely and unblinking, remained fixed on the tactical display. It was a calm before the storm, a moment suspended in time as the countdown for the Blackstar prototype continued ticking relentlessly forward. The entire fleet was poised, ready for whatever came next. The council chamber was eerily silent, its metallic walls reflecting the tense atmosphere. The representatives of the Haxar Dominion, the Zathari Collective, and the Arimian Ascendancy sat in their usual seats, thrones of polished black stone. Above them, a vast holographic projection displayed a live feed of Earth, the home of the primitive species they had long underestimated. For centuries, Earth had been nothing more than an insignificant speck on the intergalactic map. The species residing on that blue and green planet were reckless, unpredictable, and, most importantly, irrelevant. The aliens had watched with a kind of detached amusement as humans fought wars, explored their solar system, and occasionally flailed about in their attempts at spacefaring technology. But they never posed a serious threat, until now. An officer of the Haxar Dominion stood up, her many eyes scanning the feed. Her name was Trazyn, and her people had long prided themselves on their intelligence and strategy. They were known for their ability to predict the future movements of less developed species with uncanny precision. But this was something different, something she couldn't predict. The hologram flickered, showing a massive, dark structure unfolding over the Earth's surface, the Blackstar prototype. A weapon so powerful that it could reduce entire fleets to ash with a single pulse. It had been theorized, studied, and designed by humanity's brightest minds for decades. But it was never completed, or so they had thought. "This is impossible," Trazyn whispered, her voice barely audible. She stepped forward, her tentacles brushing against the holographic controls, trying to zoom in on the image. The Blackstar. It was never finished. How is it operational? The room erupted in confusion. The Zathari representative, a lithe and angular being named Kareth, slammed his fist against his seat. This is a mistake. It cannot be ready. It wasn't scheduled for activation for another century. I don't care what it was supposed to be, muttered Vroth, an elder of the Arimian ascendancy. His deep voice was laden with disbelief. His 6 arms crossed tightly in front of his chest. It's active now. Trazen's eyes narrowed as she studied the feed. Earth cities were glowing with a new intensity, as if the planet itself had woken up from a slumber. The Blackstar prototype, a massive pulsing structure at the heart of the planet, was no longer dormant. It was alive. Impossible, Kareth repeated, but his voice was tinged with something new now. Fear. Fear that had never been a part of his species' psyche. We underestimated them, Trazen said, her voice trembling with a rare emotion for her kind, panic. They weren't just toying with the technology, they've completed it. What are you suggesting? Vroth asked sharply, his eyes glinting with suspicion. The humans have activated the Blackstar. This changes everything, Trazen said, slowly, her mind racing. We need to understand why they've done this. Why now? The hologram flickered again, showing a countdown. 72 hours. The Blackstar prototype was preparing to do something far beyond their wildest expectations. The humans must have a plan, Kareth whispered, his voice shaking. This wasn't just an accident. They've been hiding this from us for centuries. Trazen turned sharply, her eyes narrowing. Or perhaps they've been hiding it from themselves. Back on Earth, Captain Erika Volkov stood before a large, sleek table inside a command center deep beneath the surface of a massive military base in Siberia. She wasn't looking at the Blackstar prototype. She had seen it 100 times in simulations. Instead, her eyes were fixed on the live feed from the council. This is it, she said, her voice cutting through the silence of the room. The prototype is online. We're ready. Volkov's face was tight with determination. Her entire career had been a steady march toward this moment. She had seen her people struggle, suffer, and fight for their place in the galaxy. For years, humanity had been brushed aside by the aliens, laughed at, underestimated. But now, everything was about to change. She would make sure of it. Beside her, Dr. Davin, the lead scientist on the Blackstar project, adjusted his glasses nervously. He was an academic by nature, someone who preferred lab coats to military uniforms. But he had always known the potential of the Blackstar, just as he had known the risks. It's not just about retaliation, Captain, he said quietly. If the Blackstar works, if we can control it, humanity will be more than just a thorn in their side. We'll be their equal. Volkov turned to face him, her expression hard. No, Davin, more than equal. We'll be their superior. She turned back to the holographic feed. The countdown was still ticking away. In the council chamber, panic was now spreading like wildfire. Representatives from the Arimian ascendancy, the Haxar Dominion, and the Zathari Collective were no longer arguing. They were shouting over one another, sending orders, calling for emergency protocols. Vroth, the elder from the Arimian ascendancy, was the first to speak again. His voice, rising above the chaos, "We must move quickly. We cannot let them think they have the advantage. We need to mobilize our forces." But Trazen, ever the strategist, shook her head. No. If they've completed the Blackstar, mobilizing our fleets will only provoke them further. They'll strike first. We need to understand their motivations before we act. If we go in blindly, we'll lose. Kareth, the Zathari diplomat, was almost pleading. You're asking us to wait? Wait for them to strike first? We don't have a choice, Trazen said firmly. We need to learn why they're doing this, what they want. We must have that answer before we make our move. On Earth, Volkov's hand hovered over a large red button. The activation of the Blackstar was not a decision she had made lightly, but it was one she knew had to be done. She glanced at Davin once more, the weight of their choices heavy in the air. You're sure this will work? She asked. We've tested it 1,000 times, Davin replied, his voice almost robotic now, as if the magnitude of their actions was slowly sinking in. But there's one thing we didn't account for. And that is, Volkov asked, her voice low. The rest of the galaxy, Davin answered quietly. A chill ran down Volkov's spine. She didn't need to ask any further questions. The moment the Blackstar activated, the galaxy would know they were no longer the underdogs. It was time. Volkov pressed the button. In the council chamber, the aliens could feel the shift in the galaxy as the Blackstar's pulse reached them. The feed cut out momentarily, and when it returned, Trazen's heart skipped a beat. A lone human voice crackled through the static, breaking the silence. This is humanity's answer. Prepare for war. The aliens were left frozen in place. The power had shifted. Earth was no longer a joke. It was a force to be reckoned with, and they had only 72 hours to decide what to do about it. The chamber was still. The silence was unnerving, a thick cloud of uncertainty that weighed heavily on the shoulders of the alien council. The once proud representatives of the Haxar Dominion, Zathari Collective, and Irimian Ascendancy sat frozen in their seats, each one grappling with the same thought. How could they have missed this? How had